Are you tired of manually adding checklist items to your planner task? What if you could automatically add checklist items to your planner task based on specific conditions? In this Power Automate tutorial, I'll show you 3 ways to quickly generate checklist items in your planner tasks to help boost your productivity. First, I'll cover how to add checklist items using the Update Task Details action. Then, I'll show you how to use SharePoint lists as a dynamic source. I'll also cover how to generate checklists from an Excel table. Lastly, I'll demonstrate how to generate checklists based on selections made in a Microsoft form. Feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps included in the description box below. Create a manually triggered flow and add an Update Task Details action. This is the action you'll need to add checklist items to your task, or manually insert an ID or dynamic content into this field by selecting Enter Custom Value. You can manually enter each checklist item using these fields. Each checklist item requires an ID, title, and whether or not you'd like the item to be checked or not. To add a new item, click the Add New Item button. You can enter any number into the ID field as long as each number entered in is unique. Save your flow and run a test. While you can add checklist items directly into the Update Task Details action, let's take a look at how to generate a checklist from a SharePoint list instead. This SharePoint list contains checklist items. Each item is assigned to an onboarding task. The onboarding task column is a lookup column for this list of onboarding tasks. In Power Automate, add a Get Items action. Remember to rename your actions to keep your flow organized. Select your site address and list name. It's best practice to filter your list using a filter query. However, since the column I want to filter on is a lookup column, I can't use it in a filter query. I'll use a filter array action instead. For now, I'll filter out any items where the title is not equal to null. This helps remove the warning Power Automate displays when a filter query isn't defined. Adjust the filter query to suit your needs. In this demo, I'll only add checklist items where the onboarding task is training. Add a filter array action. In the From field, insert the output from the Get Items action. In the first value field, insert the dynamic content you want to filter on. Remember, I'm using the filter array action because the column I need to filter on is a lookup column. If you need to filter on a simple column, like a single choice column, you can use the filter query field in the Get Items action. For this example, I'll insert the onboarding task value dynamic content. I'll leave the operator as is equal to, and in the second value field, enter training. It's important to note that the value entered here is case sensitive and must match what you see in SharePoint. Though it may seem like the filter array action only allows a single condition, you can add multiple conditions by editing in the advanced mode. I won't be covering how to do that in this tutorial as I've covered how to do that in a different tutorial. Click here to check it out. I've also linked it in the description box below. Whenever I use a filter array action, I always like to return a count of items from the action. Insert a compose action. Add an expression and use the length function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the body dynamic content from the filter array action above. I'm going to add a terminate action to my flow. This is optional but useful when building and testing. The terminate action will stop the flow from running further, allowing you to test intermediate steps. In this case, it prevents the Update Task Details action from running, so I can verify the filter array results first. Set the status to succeeded. Run a test. Review the outputs of the filter array action and compose actions. The compose action confirms that 3 items were filtered. The filter array output shows only items tagged with training. Unfortunately, the filter array output can't be directly used in the Update Task Details action. it needs to be formatted first. To get the required array format, fill in placeholder values for the checklist items. For the last field, select whether you'd like the checklist item to be checked or not. I'm going to select No. Click the icon to switch the mode. The required array needs to include keys for ID, title, and is checked. Add a select action to your flow. The select action lets you transform data by picking specific parts of an array or changing its format. In the From field, insert the body content from the filter array action. Add the keys for ID, title, and is checked. Insert the appropriate dynamic content for each key. Since the only dynamic content available to select from the filter array action is item and body, you'll need to use expressions. Here's a trick. Temporarily remove the body dynamic content from the From field and insert the value dynamic content from the Get Items action. Insert the dynamic content for ID, title, and set is checked to false for unchecked items. You can set it to true if you'd like your checklist items to be checked. Now, replace the value content in the From field with the body content from the filter array action to ensure only filtered items are used. Run a test and review the output of the select action. Once the array is ready, insert it into the checklist field of the Update Task Details action. Replace the JSON with the output from the select action. Move the Terminate action below the Update Task Details action and run a test. In Planner, the checklist items have been added to the selected task. The benefit of using a SharePoint list is the ability to dynamically add, edit, or remove checklist items as needed. I'm going to delete all the checklist items from the Planner task and add more items to the SharePoint list and run another test. In Planner, you can see that 5 checklist items have been added to the Planner task. To make this flow dynamic, add a text input for the task link. The task link contains the task ID, which we can use to dynamically select a task. We'll need to use an expression to get the task ID from the task link. Insert a compose action. Let's take a closer look at a task link. The ID is located here after the word task and a / and before the question mark. Insert an expression. We'll use the split function. The split function takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is a string of text you'd like to split. The second parameter is the separator you'd like to split the string of text at. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the task link dynamic content from the flow trigger. Add a comma and single quotes. In between the single quotes, enter the separator. In this case, we'll use the word task with a /. It's important to note that the string of text is case sensitive. Drag the Terminate action just below this compose action and run a test. Let's review the output of the compose action. The split function has split the task link at the word task and the /. This turns the URL into an array of items. The ID is located in the last item of the array. Click on the expression to edit it. Wrap the entire expression in the last function. Remember that whenever you edit an expression, you need to press the Update button to save your changes. Run a test. The expression now only returns the last part of the URL. Now we need to split this string at the question mark. Click the expression to edit it. Wrap the expression in a split function. At the start of the expression, type in split with an opening parenthesis. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression. Add a comma and single quotes. Enter a question mark in between the single quotes. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression and enter a closing parenthesis. Press Update and run another test. Let's review the output of the compose action. Remember that the split function will split a string at the separator and output an array of items. In this case, it split the string at the question mark. The task ID is the first item in the array. To get the task ID, we'll need to wrap the entire expression in the first function. Click the expression to edit it. At the start of the expression, enter the word first in an opening parenthesis. Press the down arrow key to go to the end of the expression and enter a closing parenthesis. Press Update and run another test. Confirm that the compose action is outputting the task ID. Currently, the category of checklist item tasks the filter array action is filtering on is static. To make this dynamic, I'm going to insert another text input to the flow trigger. Although I could create a list of choices, for this demo, I'm going to leave this as a standard text input. In the filter array action, replace the static text with the category text input from the flow trigger. In the Update Task Details action, remove the static task ID and select Enter Custom Value. Insert the output of the compose action that contains the task ID. Drag the Terminate action to the end of the flow. In Planner, I'm going to create a new task and copy the task link to my clipboard. Run a test. I'll paste in the task link and enter IT Setup as the category. In Planner, the task has the IT Setup checklist items added to it. I always like to keep a copy of a manually triggered flow for testing and troubleshooting purposes. Adjust this flow to suit your needs. Creating a checklist from an Excel table is very similar to creating one from a SharePoint list. In this demo, I have the checklist items in an Excel table. Just like my SharePoint list, I have a column for the title, category, and an ID. In the ID column, I have a formula to output the row number as the ID number. As long as the ID is unique, you can manually enter a number into this column or use a formula to generate an ID for you. In this Power Automate flow, I'm going to add a list rows present in a table action. Select the location, document library, file, and table. If you're interested in learning how to dynamically select a file and table in Excel, check out this tutorial. I've also linked it in the description box below. Because the category column in the Excel table has a text value, I'll define a filter query in the list rows present in a table action. It's important to note that this action only accepts a single filter query condition, and the column name you enter here cannot have any spaces. If you need to filter your items on more than one column, you'll need to use a filter array action. I'm going to use the category column. Enter EQ for is equal to, and in between the single quotes, I'll enter paperwork. Add a compose action to store the number of rows returned from this action. Insert an expression and use the length function. Click on the Dynamic Content tab and insert the value dynamic content from the list rows present in a table action. I'll drag the Terminate action before the Update Task Details action. Run a test. Confirm that the list rows present in a table action is returning items by verifying the number in the compose action. Add a select action. Just like in the previous section, we'll use the select action to transform the Excel data. In the From field, insert the value dynamic content from the list rows present in a table action. Add keys for ID, title, and is checked. Insert the appropriate dynamic content for the ID and title key. Enter true or false for the value of is checked based on your requirements. I'll enter false, which will leave the checklist item unchecked. Run a test and review the output of the select action. Now, I'm going to show you how to generate a checklist based on selections made in your Microsoft form. I'll cover how to map your multi-choice form selections to a checklist. Each item checked in your form will become a checklist item. There are two primary types of forms you can create in Microsoft Forms: group forms and personal forms. When you create a new form by pressing the New Form button, you'll be creating a personal form. You can create a new group form by selecting a group first, then pressing the New Group Form button. For this demo, I've created a group form. I have already submitted a form and will use that submission to build the flow. In Power Automate, I've created a manually triggered flow. Using a manual trigger will save you a ton of time when you build your flow. Instead of having to leave Power Automate to submit a form to trigger a test, you can build your flow off of a form that has already been submitted. Response IDs are assigned sequentially. For this demo, I'll use the first submission by entering a 1 into the response ID field. If you've already submitted your form multiple times and want to build a flow off of a specific submission, you can get the ID by going to the responses and clicking Open in Excel. Locate the response you want to use and note the response ID in the first column. Add a compose action to your flow. Use this action to output the multiple choice selections. Save your flow and run a test. Multi-choice answers from your Microsoft form are returned as a JSON formatted string. We need to convert this string to an array. Remove the dynamic content from this compose action. Insert an expression. Use the JSON function. Click the Dynamic Content tab and insert the dynamic content from your form that contains the multiple choice response. Run a test. Now the choice is output as an array. We still need to format this array so that it includes an ID for each checklist item. Initialize a variable. Use this variable to store the ID of the current item being looped through. Give your variable a name. Select integer as a type and enter 0 as the initial value. Add and apply to each action. Use this action to loop through each multiple choice selection. Add a compose action. This action is optional. However, I find it helpful to see what item I'm currently looping through. This can also help for troubleshooting purposes. Each time the apply to each action loops through, we'll want to increment the variable by 1. Add an increment variable action. Select the variable and enter 1 into the value field. Run a test. Each time this action runs, it increases the variable by 1. Now we need to collect these items into an array that can be used in the Update Task Details action. First, initialize an array variable in the root of the flow. Variables can only be initialized in the root of the flow and not nested inside any actions. In the Apply to Each action, add an Append to Array variable action. We'll use this action to collect each item and add it to the array each time it loops through. Outside of the Apply to Each action, add an Update Task Details action. Enter placeholder text into each of the checklist fields and select Yes or No for the checklist. Enter placeholder text to each of the checklist fields and select Yes or No for the Checklist is Checked dropdown based on your requirements. I'm going to select No. Click this icon to switch modes. Highlight the text between the square brackets and copy it to your clipboard. In the Append to Array variable, paste the content on your clipboard into the value field. Highlight the placeholder text, including the double quotes, and insert the appropriate dynamic content in its place. For the ID, I'll insert the ID variable. For the title, I'll insert the output from the Compose action. If you didn't use a Compose action in your flow, you can insert the current item dynamic content instead. Add a Compose action outside of the Apply to Each loop. This Compose action is also optional. However, I like to verify the output of my variables before I use them in subsequent actions. I'm going to add a Terminate action just before the Update Task Details action to prevent that action from running. This way, I can verify the output of my checklist variable first. Because the task ID is a required field in the Update Task Details action, I'll need to insert a task ID into this action so that I can run a test. The variable is in the proper format. Replace the JSON with the checklist variable. Drag the Terminate action below the Update Task Details action or delete it. Run a test. In Planner, the checklist items for this task have been generated from the selections made in the form. As you can see, the checklist items are ordered in the same order as they appear in the array. If you want to create a task from the information entered in the form, add a Create a Task action above the Update Task Details action. Instead of using a static task ID, insert the task ID dynamic content from the Create a Task action. Now this flow will create a task with the information entered into the form. It'll then add the checklist items to the recently created task. What other planner automations are you looking to create? Let me know in the comments down below. If you found this tutorial helpful and plan to create a Power Automate flow that will generate checklists in your planner tasks, please consider giving this video a like. Are you looking for a way to automate creating Microsoft Planner tasks from Microsoft Form submissions? If so, check out this Power Automate tutorial where I'll show you how to build a flow that creates tasks in Planner each time a Microsoft form is submitted. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any other Power Automate tutorials. Thanks for watching!